Classification of assets. Meron tayong dalawang classification ng asset. Meron tayong current assets and non-current assets. Dito muna tayo sa current assets. What is current assets? Under PAS 1 or Philippine Accounting Standards 1, an entity shall classify as current when it expects to realize the assets or intends to sell or consume it in its normal operating cycle. Example po nito is yung receivable, accounts receivable, because it expects to realize the asset, right? Or intends to sell or consume it. Intends to sell, of course, the inventories, current assets. Consume it. Example po nito is yung prepaid expenses, such as the prepaid insurance, prepaid rent, or supplies, like that. So, in its normal operating cycle. Letter B, it holds the assets primarily for the purpose of trading. Okay, inventories, yan. Letter B, it expects to realize the assets within 12 months after the reporting period. Yung example po nito, let's say meron tayong long-term asset, long-term receivable. Okay, when we say long-term, marireceive mo ba siya after many years? Okay, let's say 2020 ngayon, and this is our reporting period, 2020, and 2021, yung long-term receivable natin, due date na ng 2021, so marireceive na natin 2021. Ang sinasabi sa letter C, if that long-term asset ay marireceive mo na sa 2021, okay, i-consider mo na siya as current assets kasi receivable mo na siya within that 12 months after the reporting period. So, gets? Okay. Letter D, the asset is cash or cash equivalents. So, current assets, yung cash and cash equivalents. Okay? Unless the asset is restricted from being exchanged or used to settle the liability for at least 12 months after the reporting period. Ang tinutukoy lang dyan sa unless na yan is kung yung cash mo, di ba yung cash nga is current assets. However, kapag yung cash na yan is may restriction. Paano natin masabing may restriction? Kapag yung cash na yan ay nireserba mo para sa long-term obligation. Let's say, tayo yung company and meron tayong long-term obligation na babayaran after 5 years. Yung cash na to, tinatabi mo para ipambayad dito sa after 5 years pa na obligation. So, that particular cash ay hindi mo i-current assets kasi nakaparallel siya doon sa obligation. Okay? Nagagets niyo po ba? So, that particular cash na naka-reserve for that 5-year obligation, non-current to. Non-current pa to. Okay? So, hindi siya kasama sa cash and cash equivalents. Okay? So, yun po yun. So, what is an operating cycle? The time between the acquisition of the assets for processing and their realization in cash or cash equivalent. So, when we say operating cycle, it is the time of purchasing an inventory or a particular asset and the time the time wherein you sell that particular asset and na-realize mo yung cash, okay? Na-receive mo yung cash. So, yun yung operating cycle. The time of purchasing that inventory and selling it and realizing the cash from that particular inventory. Okay? So, when the entity's operating cycle is not clearly identifiable, it is assumed to be 12 months. So, kapag sa problem, hindi naman sinabi na yung operating cycle niya is 12 months, hindi naman sinabi. So, you will assume it as 12 months. Okay? Okay, tapos na tayo sa current assets. Magtungo naman tayo sa non-current assets. Non-current assets are all other assets should be classified as non-current assets. Ayun na yung binigay sa PAS 1. Okay? Kapag hindi siya na-identify or na-classify as current assets, sa non-current assets siya. So, basic lang naman yung non-current assets eh. Madali lang siyang madali mo lang siyang ma-imagine. So, that's yun yung mga property, plant, and equipment, yun yung mga tumatag longer than 12 months. Okay? Kapag current assets, hanggang 12 months lang commonly yung realization niyan. Okay? Kapag non-current assets naman, longer than 12 months. Yung PPE, property, plant, and equipment, intangible assets, etc., etc. Okay? So, examples of current assets. So, cash. Cash is any medium of exchange that a bank will accept for deposits at face value. Examples are coins, currencies, checks, money orders, bank deposits, and drafts. So, yun yung mga example ng cash. Cash equivalent naman, This is a short-term, highly liquid investments that are readily convertible to known amount of cash and which are subject to an insignificant risk of changes in value. Hindi ko na ito masyadong i-elaborate kasi in the future matututunan nyo naman to. So, kailangan nyo lang tandaan kung ano yung ibig sabihin ng cash equivalents. Short-term, highly liquid investment, insignificant risk of changes in value. So, yun, cash equivalents. Notes receivable. It is a written pledge that the customer will pay the business a fixed amount of money on a certain date. When we say notes receivable, ito yung na-receive ng company mo. So, notes receivable. So, meron kang matatanggap na cash or na cash in the future. So, merong maker or the issuer and merong receiver. So, yung maker, yung may utang sa atin, gumawa siya ng notes, binigay sa atin. Okay? Notes receivable. So, meron tayong matatanggap na cash in the future. Number 4, accounts receivable. Claims against customer arising from sale of services or goods on credit. These types of receivable offers less security than a promissory note. So, when we say accounts receivable, these are receivable ng company mo. Kapag nagbenta ka ng inventories mo sa customer mo, sabi ng customer mo, utang muna, ganon, on account yon. So, accounts receivable yon. So, yung mga on-account transaction, mga open account transaction, utang-utang muna. So, accounts receivable po yon. Okay? Number 5, inventories. These are assets which are held for sale in the ordinary course of business, in the process of production for such sale, in the form of materials or supplies to be consumed in the production process or in the rendering of services. Ang tinutukoy lamang sa inventories, when we say inventory sa merchandising business, ito yung mga binibenta mo in the ordinary course of business, yung mga binibenta mo sa customer mo. So, let's say, nagbibenta ka ng mga materials for cars, okay? Inventory yun. So, binibenta mo yun sa customer mo. Pwede namang inventory na, let's say, manufacturing business ka. So, inventory mo rin may tuturing yung mga raw materials pa lang na i-convert mo into finished goods. So, ayan po, inventories po yun. So, current assets po yun. Number 6, prepaid expenses. These are expenses paid for by a business in advance. This includes insurance and rent. When we say prepaid expenses, from the word prepaid, binayaran mo muna. Okay? So, these are expenses na binayaran mo muna before mo pa ma-consume. Okay? Let's say renta. Okay? Yung renta natin for the month, binayaran mo muna in advance to. So, before mo siya maging expenses, kailangan mo muna siya ma-consume within a month. Diba? Ganun po yun. So, prepaid expenses are the expenses that we paid in advance. Okay? So, tapos na tayo sa examples ng current assets. Pumasok naman tayo sa examples na non-current assets. Okay? Property, plant, and equipment. These are tangible assets. When we say tangible, nahahawakan, nafe-feel, okay? Nahahawakan. That are held by an enterprise for use in the production or supplies of goods or services, or for rental to others, or for administrative purposes, and which are expected to be used during more than one period. So, when we say property, plant, and equipment, yung usable niya is more than one period. More than a year, okay? This include the land, the building, the machinery, and the equipment, furnitures and fixtures, motor vehicles, and equipments, and those assets na long-term yung buhay niya, okay? Accumulated depreciation, this is a contra account that contains the sum of the periodic depreciation charges. Okay? The balance in this account is deducted from the cost of the related assets to obtain book value or carrying amount. So, yung accumulated depreciation po, kumbaga valuation account po. So, contra account to dun sa property, plant, and equipment. So, hindi ito nahihiwalay sa property, plant, and equipment. Okay? Yung accumulated depreciation. Lahat ng depreciation mo for the year, ipinapasok mo sa accumulated depreciation, wherein kapag magpe-present ka ng financial statements, particularly dun sa non-current assets na part sa PPE, ima-minus mo yung accumulated depreciation. Okay? Intangible assets. These are identifiable non-monetary assets without physical substance. Without physical substance, hindi nahawakan. Held for use in the production or supplies of goods or services. for rental to others, or for administrative purposes. These include goodwill, patents, copyrights, licenses, franchises, trademarks, brand names, secrets, processes, subscription list, and non-competitive agreements. So, malapit na mag 10 minutes. Hanggang 10 minutes lang kasi yung video natin. So, maraming salamat. I hope natutunan kayo. Bye-bye.